Edie Wiarda from Chelsea First United Methodist Church, and I'm here to continue our discussion of our Lenten readings for this season. This lesson is called Devotions for Week 5, Contemplations on Mental Illness, Obsession, and Addiction. It starts with a lament from Psalm 31. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eye wastes away from grief, my soul and body also. For my life is spent with sorrow, and my years with sighing. My strength fails because of my misery, and my bones waste away. I am the scorn of all my adversaries, a horror to my neighbors, an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I have passed out of mind like one who is dead. I have become like a broken vessel. For I hear the whispering of many, terror all around, as they scheme together against me, as they plot to take my life. The Psalms are really incredible, and we forget about what a range of emotion they convey, because we only read the pleasant ones in church. This is not about leading beside still waters and, sheep grazing from green pastures. These are dark, dark, dark emotions. And I love one of the things about Psalms that makes clear is that we are allowed to bring our worst emotions to God. We are allowed to express very difficult feelings. And of course, we're in this time of such distress and isolation and real hardship. So people are feeling a lot of difficult emotions. And, what can we do to place ourselves in the middle of that and be helpful? Some consolation. Jesus went about all the cities and villages. Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free. There are a lot of ways to be a captive and a lot of ways to be oppressed. I'm really proud of this congregation in so many ways, but in particular when we had presentations by our outreach team about community needs and how we would prioritize those in terms of our own work and mission. The one that came to the top was youth mental health. and we're working on that. Some of the readings that I offer here, I just find so compelling. A little bit more from Anne Lamott, again from her book called Traveling Mercies, about her own conversion experience. And that came about when she was really dealing with some pretty severe mental health issues. She was deeply depressed, she was alcoholic, and just not functioning at all. And also, well, I'll just read that one. It was the singing at St. Andrew Presbyterian Church that pulled me in and split me wide open. Something inside me that was stiff and rotting would feel soft and tender. Somehow the singing wore down all the boundaries and distinctions that kept me so isolated. Sitting there and standing with them to sing, sometimes so shaky and sick that I felt like I might tip over, I felt bigger than myself, like I was tricked into coming back to life. There is something that happens in church with music that is crazy. There's also some readings here from another favorite author of mine, Kathleen Norris, and in particular from a book of essays called Amazing Grace, A Vocabulary of Faith. This is a really interesting book. She tells a lot about her own conversion story in it, but the way it's structured is that each chapter is a title of a word that's a really loaded Christian word. Like she might have a chapter that's about Annunciation, and a chapter that's called Martyr, and a chapter that's called Blood. And these are words, she says, while I was becoming a Christian and trying to understand and integrate this into my own sense of myself, I'd find these words in these writings that I just didn't make any sense to me, and I had to find a way to make these words, these ancient Christian words, make sense to me. In the chapter that she calls Detachment, she tells this story. My husband once went into a depression so severe that he had to be hospitalized for several weeks. And this was at the time when she was just exploring Christianity. I was stunned to learn that we had no medical insurance. In his descent into despair, he had canceled it. But I also comprehended that this was the least of our problems. One day at the height of the crisis, I was talking to a friend in New York City who asked me, "What are you doing for yourself? Are you seeing a counselor? Did you get someone to give you a prescription for tranquilizers?" "No," I replied. And then I startled myself by saying, "I'm okay. I've been praying the Psalms." "And that's enough?" she replied, incredulous. The funny thing is, it was enough. I was not praying the Psalms alone, but with the Benedictine women who had graciously taken me into their small convent near the hospital, offering me a guest room there for as long as I needed it. There is no way I can measure the help they gave me. I told one of the sisters that I had come to feel, once the initial shock had worn off, that our situation no longer seemed like a disaster. My husband was in a safe place. My pastors, the sisters, and the monk who was the hospital chaplain had cared for me. My family had been wonderful. Friends from everywhere had also offered invaluable moral support. When I look at all of this, I can say, despite everything that's happened, it hasn't been such a bad week. The sister rolled her eyes. "You really are a fool for Christ," she said. And she laughed when I shrugged and said, "Happy Lent." Kathleen Norris, that's such a great example of what a church can be to somebody that's undergoing a catastrophe. It's just a great example. I'm sure some of you have those examples too. And here's another thing from Kathleen Norris. This one is from the chapter called Exorcism. She says, "Evil is real and not theoretical. Scratch the surface of any ordinary church congregation and you will find not hypocrites, but people struggling with demons. I know one pastor of a small 100-member church in rural South Dakota who has several men turn over their paychecks to him to deliver them to their wives. Otherwise, they know they would gamble them away. The closest thing they have to a support group outside of their families is that minister's prayers and the church to which they can go on any Sunday and be reminded that only Jesus Christ is in a position to condemn them, but he would rather they accept his forgiveness." Evil is real and not theoretical. Sickness is real and not theoretical. Obsessions are real and not theoretical. One of the questions in the reflection is something that I've been thinking a lot about. Facing addiction or mental illness can strip away our protective layers and allow profound changes to take hold in our attitudes, including toward God. How can we create a space in our church that allows such changes to take root in fruitful ways? I don't know that I really have answers. I don't have answers about that, but here's something that occurred to me. I was thinking about how reticent we can be about telling stories that seem too evangelical. And understandably, because I think we have an understanding that many church words can, on their surface, be offensive to many people. Because, well, for a lot of reasons. Not to everyone, right? But to some. And yet, we need to know and need to hear that we are profoundly loved. That who and what we are at this moment is enough. And it really is going to be okay. And that we just need to claim it just a little bit. And, it occurred to me that these writers that I've been sharing, certainly Kathleen Norris, and certainly Anne Lamott, and another one that I don't have as big an excerpt from, I believe it's Mary Kerr, I believe, Kerr. I hope it's not Karr. who's got a memoir called Lit, that is also about her conversion, motivated in no small part by her dealing with alcoholism. That these writers do an incredible job of conveying what Christianity has meant to them, what the story has meant to them. And I was thinking about, they are great evangelists. They are really compelling. And what makes them compelling is that they're just telling their own story. They're just telling their own story. And it occurred to me, maybe some of the reason, quite frankly, why some of us have trouble is that we don't know that our own stories are quite that compelling. I thought, well, gosh, Anne Lamott and Mary Kerr, they were both dealing with, severe alcoholism. They were down, it's the stereotypical story of being down at the bottom. And then Anne Lamott saw Jesus. And Kathleen Norris talks about the really profound disruption in her life and her husband's mental illness that really got her attention. And I remember thinking, well, gosh, hate to think that you need a crisis to kind of come to terms with your faith, but that seems to be the case. Guess what, folks? We got a little crisis going. We have some difficult times here. And maybe, just maybe, if we ask for some help, if we reach out just a little bit, maybe our own experience will deepen. And we'll have a richer story to tell. I think that's possible. So we got a little crisis. Maybe we can take advantage of it. Thanks.